My name is Emily Carter, and I've spent most of my 28 years feeling invisible. People like me don't just slip through the cracks, we are systematically overlooked, ignored, and sometimes even erased. I always knew I was different. My older sister, Megan, has always been the golden child in our family. She was always the one with the perfect grades, the popular one in high school, and now she's married to a successful doctor. Everything she touched seemed to turn to gold, while I felt like I was stuck in the shadows, invisible to everyone, including my own family. Growing up, it wasn't hard to see the difference between Megan and me. She was the type of person who could walk into a room and light it up. Her smile, her laughter, and the way she effortlessly made friends seemed to put everyone at ease. My parents adored her for it. And I, on the other hand, was awkward. I never really knew how to connect with people in the same way. I spent my childhood overthinking social situations, and no matter how hard I tried, I always felt like I was doing something wrong. I wasn't a troublemaker, far from it. I did my homework, kept to myself, and stayed out of trouble. But somehow that wasn't enough. While Megan was busy being the perfect child and the perfect daughter, I was the one who always felt like an afterthought. The quiet one, the weird one, the one who asked too many questions, who never knew what to say in social situations, and who was always a little too reserved for comfort. My parents loved Megan, and I loved her too, but I never understood why it felt like they loved her more. Why it seemed like everything I did was measured against her successes. And somehow my accomplishments never measured up. In our household, we didn't have much in the way of praise. My parents, Thomas and Corinne, were hardworking people, but they had their own version of success. Success meant fitting in. It meant following the rules, having the right job, and marrying well. Megan did all of that, and I spent my time in the background trying to prove that I was capable of doing something meaningful, something that would make them see me, even just once, for who I really was, but it never came. No matter how much I tried, no matter how hard I worked, it was always Megan who received the admiration. She was the one who got the praise when she graduated at the top of her class, the one who got the lavish birthday parties and the compliments for her achievements. Meanwhile, I was always pushed aside. "Good job, Emily," they'd say, but it was never said with the same enthusiasm. It was the polite praise, the kind you give to someone who is good enough but not remarkable enough to stand out. I was always told to be more like Megan, to follow her lead, but when I did, it never felt right. By the time I reached my teenage years, I had learned to accept that I would never measure up. So I stopped trying to fit in. Instead, I buried myself in my studies. I discovered early on that I was good with numbers. While other kids were out hanging out with friends or worrying about what to wear to prom, I found solace in spreadsheets and formulas. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was the only one I knew how to navigate. It felt comfortable, familiar. The data didn't judge me. Numbers didn't care if I was awkward or too quiet. They just made sense, but even with my skills in data analysis, my parents didn't see it. They never saw it. "She's just doing her thing," they'd say. "She's in her room again, playing with her computers." They never really understood what I was doing, and that was okay with me. I didn't need their approval. Or so I told myself. Megan, of course, excelled in everything she did. She made friends easily, she went to all the right parties, and everyone loved her. The first time she introduced me to one of her friends, I was 16 and she was 18, we were at a family barbecue, and she casually introduced me as her awkward little sister with a smile that I could see through. Like she knew I wasn't a perfect fit for her perfect world. "She's a little shy, but she's really good with computers," Megan said with a laugh, as if my skills were some kind of joke. I wasn't a joke, though. I knew I was talented, I just didn't know how to explain it to her or anyone else for that matter. My parents never acknowledged my hard work the way they did Megan's. They never celebrated my successes. Instead, I found myself being told to smile more, talk less about my projects, and more often than not, to just be quiet and blend in. "You're not like Megan, Emily," my mother would say, her tone soft but laden with disappointment. "Can you try to be more like her? She knows how to make people like her." That was the crux of it. I wasn't the charming, easy-to-love daughter that Megan was. I was the odd one out, and it hurt. But rather than confront my family or complain, I retreated further into myself. My escape was in data, in numbers. I would spend hours late into the night studying, teaching myself things they didn't understand. While Megan was out making friends, I was perfecting my knowledge of spreadsheets, data manipulation, and business analysis. And then came college. Megan went to a prestigious school with a scholarship, and my parents were thrilled. She was the golden child, always on the fast track to success. As for me, I got accepted into a state university, not as a star pupil, but as someone who was good enough. No fanfare, no grand celebration. Just a nod of approval, like I had met the minimum standard. They didn't understand that I had dreams that didn't fit their idea of success. I wasn't going to follow in Megan's footsteps. I wasn't interested in becoming a part of her world. My world was different, and I was okay with that. At college, I found my true calling. I majored in business analytics and computer science. I learned everything I could about making sense of chaotic data, and I realized that I was good at it, really good. I started taking on small clients, mostly local businesses struggling to keep up in the digital age. They hired me to build their websites, analyze their sales patterns, and improve their marketing strategies. By the time I graduated, I had built a portfolio of clients and projects that proved I was good at what I did. But still, it was nothing that would make my family proud. In their eyes, I was still just Emily, the quiet one, the oddball. Then came the defining moment. One evening, after I had graduated and secured my first real consulting gig, I overheard my parents talking about Megan's upcoming wedding. They were gushing about how perfect everything was. How Megan was marrying this wonderful doctor, a man with a prestigious career and the perfect future. But as they were talking, I overheard something that shook me to my core. Emily doesn't belong in this world, my dad said quietly, as if he thought I couldn't hear him. She doesn't know how to fit in. She's awkward and she doesn't know how to present herself properly. It's like she's always out of place. Those words hurt more than anything. I was no longer just the awkward daughter. I was the one who didn't belong, the one they wished didn't exist in their world. It was in that moment, that raw, painful moment, that I realized something. If they couldn't see my worth, I would have to make them see it, and that was when everything changed. After that fateful night, everything changed. I could no longer ignore the fact that my family, the people I'd spent my life trying to impress, would never truly see me for who I was. No matter how much I achieved, no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the awkward one, the unseen one. But something inside me snapped. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of trying to mold myself into something I wasn't. If they weren't going to see my worth, then I would make them see it in a way they'd never expect. I was done being their secret. For the first time in my life, I made the decision to focus on myself. It was time to stop trying to fit into their perfect world. Instead, I was going to create a world of my own. A world where I was in control, a world where I was the one who called the shots. The feeling of being rejected, being cast aside for someone else's idea of success, ignited a fire inside me that I couldn't ignore. If they were going to treat me like this, then it was time to show them what they were missing. I threw myself into my work. I had always been good with numbers, with data, and I had built a small business around my ability to analyze and manipulate data for small businesses that were struggling. I had spent months helping small hotels and resorts adjust their pricing models, improve their online booking systems, and optimize their marketing campaigns. I was the invisible expert, the one behind the scenes making things happen. While my family was busy living their ideal lives, I was quietly making a name for myself in the business world. But I wasn't satisfied. Not anymore. I wasn't just going to be the quiet consultant in the background. I was going to be the one on the front lines, leading the charge. One of my clients, a luxury resort chain called Harrington and Vail Resorts, was in financial turmoil. Their bookings had plummeted after the pandemic, and they were desperate for help. The last agency they had hired had failed miserably, and now they were reaching out to me. I knew I could help them. This was my moment, the moment when I could prove, once and for all, that my talents were real and valuable. I dug into their data like a detective searching for a lead. I combed through years of their financial records, their booking history, and their advertising data. I found the weaknesses. Their pricing models were outdated. Their marketing campaigns were targeting the wrong demographics, and their website was losing potential customers due to a clunky booking system. But most importantly, I found an opportunity to change everything. I knew that if I could turn their business around, I wouldn't just be helping a resort chain recover. I would be creating something bigger. This would be my chance to prove my worth, to show my family and the world that I was capable of far more than they ever realized. For the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly. I restructured their pricing model, making it dynamic and based on real-time demand. I shifted their advertising budget, cutting out underperforming campaigns and focusing on the right audiences. I redesigned their booking process, making it seamless and user-friendly. Slowly, the numbers began to change. The bookings started to climb and the revenue followed. But the most significant shift was in me. I was no longer the invisible, overlooked daughter. I was the one who had the power to transform an entire company, and that was something I could not ignore. As the weeks went by, the improvements were undeniable. Harrington and Vale was on track for a complete turnaround, and they had me to thank for it. I knew this would be the catalyst for my career. But more than that, I knew it would be the moment that would force my family to finally see me for what I was capable of. I had made it not because of their support, but because of my own strength and determination, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I had taken the first step, but now it was time to take control of the narrative. If my family wouldn't recognize my worth, then I would make them. I was going to show them, once and for all, that I wasn't the awkward sister anymore. A few weeks later, I received a call that I wasn't expecting. It was from Graham Harrington, the CEO of Harrington and Vale Resorts. I had been working with him and his team closely, but this call was different. "Emily," Graham said, his voice full of excitement, "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for us. You've turned the business around in ways we didn't even think were possible. We want to bring you on full-time. We want you to lead our data strategy division. You're exactly what we need." I froze. Full-time? This wasn't just a thank you for my hard work. It was a recognition of my ability to lead, to be in control of something bigger than myself. I was no longer just a small-time consultant. I was being offered a permanent position at a major company. I was about to be recognized for the first time in my life. I'd be honored. I replied, my voice steady despite the overwhelming emotions flooding through me. "I'm in." As soon as I hung up the phone, I sat there stunned. For the first time in my life, I felt like everything I had worked for, all the years of being dismissed, all the times I'd been told I wasn't good enough, were finally worth it. I had proven my worth, and I hadn't needed anyone else to do it for me. In the days that followed, I felt a surge of power that I had never experienced before. I had always known I was capable of doing something amazing, but now I was living it. I was on the verge of becoming a key player in a multi-million-dollar company, and there was nothing anyone could say to take that away from me. I was no longer the awkward, overlooked sister. I was Emily Carter, a force to be reckoned with. I began to plan my next move. I knew that this new job at Harrington and Vale wasn't just about business. It was about reclaiming my life. For so long, I had let my family's opinions dictate my worth, and I wasn't going to do that anymore. I was done waiting for their approval. I wasn't going to let them decide my fate. I would make them see me, and I would make sure they knew that it was my skills, my hard work, and my determination that had gotten me here. The days of being dismissed were over, but the real test was still to come. My family had no idea what was happening. They had no idea how much I had changed, how much I had accomplished without their support. And they wouldn't know until I was ready to show them doubt. For now, I kept my head down and focused on my work. But deep down, I knew that the moment of reckoning was coming. The moment when my family would finally have to acknowledge me. And when it came, it would hit them like a ton of bricks. The night of the Harrington and Vale Resorts New Year's Eve gala arrived faster than I expected. I had spent weeks preparing, mentally bracing myself for what I knew would be the most pivotal night of my life. The gala wasn't just about the company celebrating its growth, it was about me. Finally stepping into the light, no longer as the invisible daughter in the background, but as a leading force in my own right. I had always known this moment would come, but I hadn't expected it to feel so overwhelming. The resort in Miami was beyond anything I had ever seen. The marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers, which hung like crystals from the ceiling, and towering palm trees lined the grand entrance. The space was adorned with opulent decorations and soft ambient lighting. It felt like a world my family had always dreamed of being a part of, but never quite fit into. This was the world they had chased for years, a world where status, money, and connections were everything. But tonight, I was no longer a guest at the table. I was the one people would be looking at. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly where I belonged. I arrived early, wanting to take in everything around me. The air was thick with anticipation, filled with the sound of glasses clinking and soft chatter. As I stepped into the ballroom, I was immediately greeted by Graham Harrington, the CEO of Harrington and Vale Resorts, who had become a trusted mentor to me over the past few months. His warm smile made me feel at ease in an environment that could have easily overwhelmed anyone else. "Emily, welcome." "It's so good to see you here," Graham said, his voice filled with genuine excitement. "This night wouldn't have been possible without you. I can't wait for you to meet the rest of the team." As he introduced me to various high-profile guests, I couldn't help but marvel at how different everything felt. The world I'd been working so hard to enter, the world my parents and Megan had always dreamed of, was now my world. I wasn't just another attendee. I was someone who had changed the game, someone whose efforts had transformed an entire company, and that was something no one could ignore. But despite my excitement, a sense of unease lingered in my chest. Megan would be here. My parents would be here. They had no idea I was attending, and though I wasn't sure how they would react, I knew one thing for certain. This night was going to make them see me differently. This would be the night I would make them realize that I had finally surpassed their expectations, not only in my career, but in life. They would never look at me the same way again. The evening continued with speeches and introductions, and soon Celeste Harrington, Graham's wife, stood up to give a speech. She was poised, elegant, and effortlessly commanding attention. As she addressed the crowd, I could see her warmth and respect for the people around her, especially for the ones who had contributed to the company's recovery. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we gather not only to celebrate our company's success, but to honor the incredible individuals who helped make this success possible," Celeste said, her voice carrying across the room. "One of those people is Emily Carter, our chief data strategist, who has truly turned our business around. Without her expertise and dedication, we wouldn't be here tonight." The room fell silent. I stood up, my heart racing, my palms clammy, but I made my way to the stage, trying to keep my composure. I could feel every pair of eyes on me as I stepped up, but for the first time, I didn't shrink away. I didn't hide in the shadows. I belonged here. Celeste smiled warmly as she gestured toward me. "Emily, your work has been instrumental in turning this company around. We are incredibly grateful for everything you've done." As the applause erupted, I turned to look at my family. Megan was standing at the back of the room, her jaw slightly dropped, her face pale. She wasn't used to seeing me in the spotlight, and I could tell she was struggling to process the scene before her. Her carefully curated image of success was suddenly shattered. I wasn't just Emily, the awkward sister. I was Emily Carter, a leader, and the world was finally starting to take notice. My parents stood frozen, their faces a mix of disbelief and regret. They had never seen me like this before. They had spent so many years telling me I wasn't enough, and now here I was, being acknowledged by some of the most influential people in the industry. The applause continued, and I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't just a professional achievement. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment when I could finally let go of all the pain I had carried for so long. The years of feeling invisible, of being disregarded and underestimated, were finally behind me. I had earned this. After the speech, the night carried on with laughter, music, and champagne. But as the evening progressed, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes constantly on me. I knew my family would eventually approach me. I had expected that. But what I didn't expect was the discomfort that radiated from them. They had always been the ones at the center of attention, the ones who were admired by the people they wanted to impress. Now, that spotlight was on me, and I could see how uncomfortable it made them. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I looked down to see a text from Megan. "Hope you're enjoying the night. You've really changed things, haven't you?" It was the first time she'd acknowledged me, not with sarcasm or pity, but with something that almost resembled respect. I paused for a moment before typing back, "Yeah, it's been a good night. Just wanted to show you that there's more to me than you thought." A few minutes later, Megan appeared in front of me, her smile forced, but she still tried to keep up her usual charm. "So this is what it's all about, huh?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. "All this. Recognition, attention, and applause. It must feel nice, huh?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I took a sip of my drink and looked around the room. The people Megan had spent her whole life trying to impress were now turning to look at me. They didn't care about the designer clothes she wore or the perfect image she had crafted. They cared about the work I had done. They cared about what I had built. Yeah, it feels great, I said finally, meeting her eyes. But it's not just about the recognition. It's about what I've been able to achieve. You may have connections, Megan, but I have something even more valuable, the ability to create value. Megan's smile faltered. She didn't know how to respond. She'd always been the one in the spotlight, always the one who was admired for her beauty, her status, and her connections. But tonight, the world had shifted. I was the one who had the power now, and it was clear that Megan wasn't used to this role reversal. Before she could respond, my parents approached. Their expressions were mixed. There was a hint of pride, but it was overshadowed by the uncomfortable realization that they had spent so many years dismissing me. This wasn't just a celebration of success. It was a confrontation with the truth. The applause from the gala still echoed in my ears as I walked away from the stage. I had just been honored in front of the entire room, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had earned something that was truly mine. This wasn't a trophy to be shoved aside. It was a victory, not just for my career, but for who I was as a person. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, though, and I knew it was time for the final confrontation. They hadn't been ready for this moment. They never thought I would get here. They never believed I could be anything other than the awkward daughter in the background. But now they had no choice but to acknowledge me. They had no choice but to face the fact that I was the one who held the power, not them. As the evening wore on, I could see my family moving through the crowd, trying to fit in with the other guests. Megan was at the center, as usual, attempting to keep up appearances, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. This wasn't her world anymore. Not like it had been before. She was no longer the one who was admired, the one who had the connections. I was the one in the spotlight, and she knew it. I didn't need to rush over to her. I didn't need to gloat. The truth was, I didn't care about her approval anymore. I had moved on from that need. This moment wasn't about making her feel bad. It was about making her understand that I didn't need her. I never needed her approval or her validation. I had built my success, and I was proud of it. Eventually, Megan approached me. She wasn't smiling, and I could see the tension in her eyes. She'd always been the one to control the narrative between us, but tonight was different. Tonight, the tables had turned. "Emily," she said, her voice strained. "I see what you've done here. I didn't expect you to be recognized like this." I could feel the weight of her words. There was a mix of shock, envy, and perhaps a hint of guilt in her voice. But the most important thing was that she was acknowledging me. She was finally seeing me for who I truly was, not for who she wanted me to be. "It feels nice, doesn't it?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "To be seen for the work you've done? To be recognized for the impact you've made? You know, Megan, you've spent so many years trying to impress everyone else, trying to live up to their standards. But I'm not living for anyone else anymore. I'm living for me. And tonight I get to show the world who I am." Megan looked at me, her face flushed with something I couldn't quite place. She opened her mouth to speak but closed it again, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't the conversation she had imagined having. She'd always been the one with the answers, always the one who had the upper hand. But now she was the one being confronted. Now she was the one who had to face the truth. Before she could say anything more, I turned to face my parents. They were standing in the corner watching me, the awkward daughter they had always tried to hide from the world. They had never once given me the credit I deserved, and yet here I was, standing tall and proud in front of the very people who had dismissed me. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice strong, "do you see me now?" They both looked up, surprised by the directness of my question. My mother's eyes softened, but there was still a trace of disbelief in her expression. She had spent so many years making excuses for Megan's behavior and ignoring mine. She had spent years telling me I wasn't good enough, and yet here I was, the one who had truly made a difference. "We're proud of you, Emily," my dad said, his voice quiet, almost apologetic. "We should have seen it sooner." But I wasn't interested in their apologies. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had built something for myself, something that didn't depend on their approval. They had tried to control me for so long, trying to force me into a mold I didn't fit. But I had outgrown that mold. I had outgrown the idea that I needed to please them. "You should have," I replied, my voice steady. "But I'm not here to ask for your approval. I'm here because I've built something you can't ignore anymore. I don't need to shrink for you to feel big. That night, after the speeches and the toasts had died down, I received a call from Graham Harrington. He asked to meet me in private, and I agreed. As I walked into the quiet room, he looked at me with a broad smile. You've been incredible. Emily, you've not only saved this company, but you've also proven your worth in a way we didn't expect. We want to make sure you're properly compensated for your contributions. We'd like to offer you a permanent position as a strategic partner. I paused for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I had come a long way. I wasn't just a consultant anymore. I was being offered a partnership. This wasn't just about work. This was about my value being recognized on a global scale. Thank you, Graham, I said, my voice calm. I've been working for this moment my whole life. And now it's time for me to take control. The days after the gala were a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and new opportunities. But as the excitement faded, I realized that the most important confrontation was still to come. My family, the ones who had dismissed me for so long, still hadn't fully accepted who I had become. They hadn't acknowledged my success in the way I needed them to. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of it. But I did want them to understand. I wanted them to see that I was worth more than their dismissals. They had spent years belittling me, and now it was time for them to face the truth. It wasn't long before Megan called. Her voice was filled with frustration and disbelief. How could you do this to me? She demanded. I tried to protect you. I didn't want you to embarrass us. I paused for a moment, then replied, I'm not the one who's been embarrassing. I'm not the one who's been hiding. I'm the one who has been working to build something real. You and Mom and Dad, you all thought I was too awkward, too different. But you missed the point. I wasn't the one who needed to change. You were. As I hung up the phone, a sense of peace washed over me. I had taken control. I had built my own success, and I didn't need their approval anymore. The person they had tried to hide for so long was now the one they couldn't ignore. That was the true power of my revenge. It wasn't about humiliating them. It was about finally claiming my space, proving to myself and the world that I was more than they had ever seen.